technique. And I had seen encaustics off and on in various museums, since I started going to museums. That it might just be a little highly detailed, realistic still life, and I was always curious, what does that mean in caustic, and how do they do that with wax? And in 2002, I think, is when I saw an encaustic workshop in Santa Fe, and
California, or
and I went for a week, and the whole thing, I just got really absorbed in it instantly. And I mean, just the smell of melting beeswax. You have to have a hot palette. So, I mean, some people will just go out and buy like a pancake griddle, but you can buy specific hot palettes for melting the beeswax and the pigment as well. And there are companies now that encapsulate pigment in wax, and that's the equivalent of a tube of paint. It's very condensed color, so you're melting that on the surface too. And literally, you go from that hot palette with your brush of color, melted wax color, to the painting, and make your mark very quickly because it solidifies within 3 seconds.
Yeah, as soon as it starts to cool, and it's hard.
It's very fast. So through everything I knew about acrylic and oil painting, which was my expertise, and out the window, I sort of had to, I had to rethink everything. It was just, the whole experience was so different than using oil paint or acrylic.
It would have to be, because you have to work in a whole oil paint. You kind of have to let it dry, and then or it gets muddy. And here you have to work really fast.
And there's some unique properties to working with encaustic too, in that if something doesn't work, you can take a razor and just scrape it, the whole thing out, like that, and reapply to correct it. Or you can use scraping to affect the texture or make marks.
Because I think you've made some marks in here, in this larger painting, right?
Right.
Now, did you do that with scraping?
That I believe I used a hot tool to make those marks.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. Like the vertical marks, and then the more textural marks that look more spotty and organic. Those are actually like a dry brush mark that you would get from using oil paint or acrylic. There's a technique called dry brush. Mm-hmm. So it took me a while to actually feel like I could really manage and handle the medium.
Because there's such a depth to it. And that, I think, is what people don't understand, or what they see and they're captivated by. So there's a depth to these. Like, look at this bead. I mean, you can see that there's a bead there, but then there's these layers on top of it. It's just intriguing. It's gorgeous. Now, so you painted the bead underneath.
Right.
Now, is that a certain kind of, to layer up, is it like wax on wax, or how do you?
Well, that's one of the unique things about encaustic painting is people notice the jewel-like quality, and it's not really much different than looking into if the audience understands looking at an agate, a stone like an agate, a cut agate, and the depth in that. It's very similar to that. And yes, you have to layer, and with each layer, I think in this one, I started out with the idea of the bee dance, which is a particular dance that the bee colony will do to indicate where the flowers are that they want the rest of the colony to go and collect the pollen. I believe I did an abstraction of that as the first layer, and then so that's wax, and it needs to be fused, and any other layer on top of that needs to be fused to the previous layer. So probably the bee dance is first, and you can see the line of that movement of the bee dance, and then there's probably a layer of plain beeswax to create depth, and then the queen bee herself and is fused on there, and then another layer of clear, and probably the larger flower is next, and so it goes on like that. You're fusing each layer to the previous layer.
Wow.
With a light heating of the whole surface. Your audience may be interested in knowing that, the fan portraits have survived really well, and some folks have asked me, well, aren't you afraid it's going to melt, or something happen to it? And actually, there is not a problem with that. I mean, you wouldn't want to keep an encaustic painting in direct sunlight, nor would you do that with an oil painting. And the only problem you would have is if the temperature got up to 150 degrees, which everyone would be in trouble then, right?
That's right.
And that's so the melting point begins at 150 degrees, and the temperature that I work at is about 220 degrees. So it just begins to melt at 150 degrees. And again, we would all be in trouble if the temperature reached 150 degrees. And the other thing that you should be concerned about is not exposing encaustic to freezing temperatures. But again, the same thing with oil painting. It's very, very harmful to an oil painting.
It'll crack, yeah.
Right.
Well, I know they're like moisture resistant, mildew resistant, because they were humming castles that are like really
right.
moist or damp, cold and damp.